It sounds like there was a lot of like sort of not made here syndrome between the departments where like each of them wanted to be the one that did it, but then someone would come in and they would be the one who wants to do it, and then someone else would move stuff around. It just all
Yeah,
tries to
yeah,
like devour itself.
yeah, and it's essentially, well, software engineering has a lot to answer for because even just the term suggests that it's a kind of purely
Yeah.
sort of analytical and mathematical kind of empirical process.
Hmm.
But the reality is that your kind of social design of how your organization is structured and how you communicate and how you set targets and measure them and things is
Hmm.
reflected in the software that you produce.
Hmm.
It's probably more like coral or something, right? It grows
Okay,
and it
more
leaves shell
metaphors. Okay,
behind.
here we go.
I'm sorry, I'm terrible with
No, it's
metaphors,
fine. Go on. Let's see where this one
but
goes.
but the way that the organism
Ah,
works reflects the environment it creates and leaves behind.
right.
So if it grows this way or it grows this shape, then that's the shape of the shell.
Uh-huh.
And then the growing is here and whatever. So if you have like a really weird organization structure, or you set goals in a really weird way and you don't invest in certain ways, then you end up with also really weird software that reflects it. So you have, this kind of fragility, or you're not ready for requirements to change. And so big companies which have these really complicated structures
Hmm.
kind of stamp those really complicated structures on the software that they make.
Hmm.
I think it's Conway's law. Don't quote me, but check on Wikipedia. But it's basically like the software architecture will reflect the organizational architecture of the
Yes, Conway's
organization
law.
that creates it. And Nokia was like a worked example of Conway's law. That
Hmm.
like some of my most profitable days as a consultant would be like in Helsinki, and they'd be like have this conversation and like you already have a team who's working on solving this problem. They are 3 doors that way. Let's go and talk to them. And we're like, wow, we have an API for single sign-on. Yes, yeah. Like,
Oh.
meet UC. He's the single sign-on team. You want to log on? He can hook you up. Let's do that. I'm like, my work here is done.
Mhm.
And in a sense, like and that was Samsung's problem as well,
Uh-huh.
except like tenfold. They would approach things with this massive hierarchy, and there would be like a guy whose job was to write the software for the button widget,
Right.
and like he would maintain the button. And I'm like, well, you can't really, if you've pre-selected the way that your organization architecture works and your software architecture, you can't like tappable button. Like, I
Mhm.
know that's a different person.
Oh,
We need
God.
to restructure the team or whatever. So this is really
Yeah,
weird
then what
ways
happens
of
when that guy
organization
leaves?
design. Right. No more buttons.
No
Like,
buts.
yeah. So yeah, lots of really strange kind of organizational dynamics. And in a sense, that was the thing that we could see being these kind of outside consultants. And I
Mhm.
think that's something that we were trying to do a lot, is kind of have a bigger conversation with customers that wasn't just about their software and the open source and things. It was more to do with the way that they approached engineering internally, and the way that they aligned that with the way that open source software and the community process and governance and things worked outside. So in a sense, more to do with kind of strategy, and from the strategy, how you can then effectively set up the tools and the team to succeed and to be
Mhm.
efficient. Um, and be ready for the kind of business conditions to change as well. But not all customers wanted that. If you were talking to a software person, they wanted to buy some software or buy some services, and then
Mhm.
you end up in those situations I was describing earlier. And like, this is going nowhere. I mean, we'll do the job, we'll give you the code, and best of luck kind of thing. But um,
So obviously, like what you're doing now at Endless OS is very different from what you're doing when you were doing that work at Collabora. But I would imagine that seeing how these organizations are structured has given you some insight on like what you don't want to do being in that like management leadership position.
yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Because it's easy to point fun at others, but
Sure.
it's also pretty hard to set up the the right conditions for success. I mean, that's kind of the art of management, is basically, if you're good at it, it looks like you're not doing anything.
Right.
Because in a sense, you've got the team set up, and you've got the team that you need. They have everything they need. They've got clear inputs and outputs and goals, and then they're empowered to go and solve all of the things that they need to solve. And so if you kind of get everything around the edge, all the interfaces and all of the those things well defined, then the team is then able to organize themselves. And we're having a sort of an experiment at the moment in Endless, because we have had this problem of we had a larger team when we were Endless Mobile, kind of for profit, and we had to reduce the team size because we had less funding as a non-profit. And obviously these are all really horrible situations, but we kind of end up with like, okay, we now have one person who really knows how this component or this software works. And now that team that used to be 7 people is now 4 people. And actually, if you give 3 or 4 goals to that team of 3 or 4 people, then everyone is working on a separate thing. And you kind of lose some of this idea of the team coming together and working on the organization goals and sort of solving all those things. So we have an experiment now, which was actually the idea of Daniel Drake, who's our engineering VP, that we would actually put all of our projects on hold apart from one of them. Right. And well, to the greatest extent, as on hold as you can get, given that we've got customers that need to maintain stuff, but have the entire team in terms of development working on one product altogether. So we're doing that for 6 months. So we're in our first semester of working on Endless Key with the whole team. So we have kind of a platform with OS team, and we have like an apps, more kind of UI user-facing experience team. And they're both working on Endless Key, sort of the build system, the infrastructure, the content recommendations, the presentation, the UI, the design. And that's an experiment we're doing at the moment to try and kind of allow people to go and understand our priorities at a higher level, but then to solve some of the micro detail themselves, because that gives them the opportunity to research and to choose how things are done. And if you do too much kind of centralized planning, then you end up kind of taking away people's opportunity to, I guess, feel ownership in what they're doing. If it's just like a task comes off the queue and you do something, then you're kind of just in a kind of conveyor belt situation where you're not able to kind of exercise some of that creativity and problem solving. So we're trying to provide more high level context and less kind of micro detail, and kind of give away some of the planning and let the team sort of have more involvement in choosing their tasks and priorities and the way that they approach things.